Hello, and welcome to the next in the Effective Writing Center series of workshops. I'm Dan Gallagher, Director of the EWC. Workshop is titled Punctuation Re-Education 2, Chameleon, and is being presented by Laura Deffley and Kevin Folliard. Laura Deffley received a BA in English from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, where she studied literature, psychology, and gender studies. She continued her study of literature at the University of Maryland at College Park, where she earned an MA at both of her alma maters, as well as at New York University. Since 2008, she's been an online writing advisor for the Effective Writing Center at UMUC. Kevin Folliard has been a writing advisor with UMUC's Effective Writing Center since 2010. He has a degree in English and Creative Writing from the University of Illinois at Champaign-Urbana, and he has also published sci-fi, fantasy, horror, and young adult fiction. To ask a question during the broadcast, please use the chat feature in YouTube, which will be either below or to the side of your viewing window. This workshop, like all our workshops, will be archived for future viewing in the Effective Writing Center's Google Plus community. And now let's begin tonight's workshop, Kevin.
Thank you so much, Dan. Recently, the EWC hosted a Google Hangout called Punctuation Re-Education, reviewing the rules we often forget, which you can check out here. In that lesson, we covered pretty much every punctuation you can think of, from periods to semicolons to ellipses and all those subtle variations on slashes, dashes, and parentheses. But let's not kid ourselves. When it comes to punctuation, there's an elephant in the room that drives writers nuts. It's these crazy little hooks we stick in our sentences called commas. When are we supposed to use commas? Where do they go? How and why do you know when to use one versus when not to? Move over question mark, because commas are without a doubt the most perplexing point of punctuation and writing. The truth is, commas just plain have a lot of jobs. We use them the most, so as a result, we have a tendency to misuse them too. A lot. That's why today the comma is starring in its very own special Google Hangout. The best way to understand commas is to take a close look at how to use them and how not to use them. This lesson is going to be very heavily example-driven because examining specific sentences is the best way to get a true sense of how punctuation works. Here are the 4 areas of comma usage that create the most writer confusion: sentence construction and structure, listing items or ideas, integrating evidence, and situations where there is room for interpretation. Laura and I are going to provide specific examples for all 4 of these topic areas, but first, let's bust a couple of common comma myths. A lot of times, students use the comma as go-to punctuation if they feel like the sentence may be missing something, but they aren't sure what. We know that commas come up a lot in writing, so sometimes we might be afraid that our sentences don't have enough of them. Sometimes we get the idea that a comma's job is to create a pause for the reader. Well, that's sort of a half-truth. While readers might pause briefly when they see a comma or a period, that's not really the grammatical purpose of the comma. In truth, the comma is always doing something else. You're really pausing because you're listing items, entering a new independent clause, or stopping to define an idea in a subordinate clause, not because writers can insert pauses anywhere they want. The number one way to start using commas right is simply to understand their functions and always know exactly why you are using one in your sentence. Laura, why don't you fill us in on some important structural issues that relate to comma placement?
Thanks, Kevin. As you noted in the myths section, many students feel the need to decorate their papers with commas. Often students tell me that they automatically use a comma every time they use the word and. While we sometimes need to use a comma with the word and, it should not be automatic. Please do not be robotic about comma usage. Rather, we should ask ourselves, what is and doing in this sentence? Does it need a comma to help it? What and does often in sentences is coordinate, which is why it is considered one of the coordinating conjunctions. Essentially, and connects words, phrases, and clauses with other words, phrases, and clauses. Think of and along with the other coordinating conjunctions, for, nor, but, yet, and so, which can be remembered using the word fanboys, as the matchmakers of the grammar world. They bring words, phrases, and clauses together to live in harmony and to explain concepts and ideas to your audience. Fanboys need commas to help them when they are coordinating two or more complete sentences. The comma is placed directly before the fanboys to indicate the sentences could stand on their own as separate single sentences, but they have decided to work together because they are stronger together than apart. In a way, commas help to marry two complete sentences together. Take a look at the three separate sentences on this slide. They are short and choppy by themselves. When and so are used to combine these three sentences into one, the ideas flow a lot better. As you can see, a comma appears before both and so to indicate where the connections are being made. To help you apply the knowledge that I just shared, I'm going to provide two examples. In your head, ask yourself, does this sentence need a comma? I'll give you a few seconds to think of your answer. Then I'll let you know what should be done. So, does the first sentence need a comma? The answer is no, because the phrase that follows and is not a complete sentence. Walking in the evenings needs the first part of the sentence to be complete. Now let's look at the second example. Does this sentence need a comma? The answer is yes, because the word and separates two complete sentences. There is a subject, verb, and complete thought before the word and, as well as a subject, verb, and complete thought after the word and. Would you like to discuss this issue a little more? Never fear. Kevin is here to dive deeper into the differences between compound sentences and complex sentences. Take it, Kevin.
Thank you, Laura. That is a great overview of the role of conjunctions and how to place a comma in front of a coordinating conjunction. What can sometimes be confusing is spotting the difference between a compound sentence, in which you have two complete pairs of subject and verb, and a complex sentence, where there is only one subject with two verbs. As Laura explained, a compound sentence requires the comma before the coordinating conjunction, which you can see in that first example. However, notice what happens when we take away the second subject in the second example. Father set the table and prepared his famous mac and cheese. We no longer need a comma because both verbs are linking back to the same subject. As we'll clarify later, pairs of items don't need to be set apart with commas. They just need a conjunction between them. A complex sentence is really just that. It's one subject followed by a pair of verbs. When you boil your sentences down to just the subjects and verbs, it's much easier to see what kind of sentence you're dealing with and what kind of punctuation you need.
Thanks for that helpful explanation, Kevin. Now I'm going to tackle comma splices. Essentially, a comma splice error occurs when a writer uses a comma to combine two complete sentences. However, a comma cannot do that job on its own. A comma either needs help from one of the fanboys that we discussed earlier. Alternately, the comma needs to be replaced by a semicolon or period. All right. So, while the comma can perform many jobs, it cannot do everything. Combining two independent clauses on its own falls outside its job description. Now Kevin is going to take us even further along this path with the discussion of run-on sentences. Take it, Kevin.
Thank you, Laura. Similar to a comma splice is our old nemesis, the run-on sentence. The simplest definition of a run-on is simply a sentence that goes on longer than it's supposed to. But a more technical definition is a sentence that has three or more independent clauses packed into one sentence without proper punctuation. If you understand sentence structure and proper punctuation between those independent clauses, complete sets of subject and verb, then you're going to be able to spot a run-on. Uh-oh, here comes one right now. Let's see if we can read this monster. The Spinosaurus had powerful jaws and sharp claws, and she bit and tore the flesh of her prey with these amazing adaptations, but that's not all. Spinosaurus also had a large sail on her back, which may have been used to regulate body heat. Whew, I read it, but it was exhausting. And no matter how interesting the facts in a sentence are, you don't want to overwhelm your reader. we can improve by stopping the run-on and enforcing the writing speed limit. Notice that the writer actually did the right thing, putting commas between the independent clauses, but there are just plain too many independent clauses here. You're allowed 2 sets of subject and verb per sentence before the English language says, enough is enough, it's time to use a period. The first comma plus conjunction is okay, and even the second verb in that compound complex sentence is grammatically okay as is, but after that, we'll need a period to keep going. Here's one potential revision. Spinosaurus had powerful jaws and she bit and tore the flesh of her prey, period. However, that's not all, period. Spinosaurus also had a large sail. Now, other than feeling the wordiness and lengthiness of this sentence by reading it aloud, how do we know that we had a run-on? Just remember, it's all about counting the independent clauses, the complete sets of subject and verb. And here are all 4 of them that had snuck into that original sentence. Spinosaurus had, she bit and tore. That is not, Spinosaurus had. There are many ways to correct a run-on like this, and here's another example. The Spinosaurus had powerful jaws and sharp claws, period. With these amazing adaptations, comma, she bit and tore the flesh of her prey, period. Spinosaurus also possessed a large sail. As long as you're limiting yourself to 2 independent clauses per sentence, you will thwart the run-on. Now, in addition to playing a key role in sentence construction, putting clauses together, or keeping them apart, another major feature of commas is listing ideas. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about that, Laura?
Sure, Kevin. When a writer lists items in a sentence, the items should be separated by commas to help the audience know when one item ends and another begins. On the slide, you will see an example of how difficult it is to read a list without commas, followed by a list that contains commas. Not only do commas help to visually separate list items, but certain style guides like APA ask that writers use serial commas. A serial comma, also known as the Oxford comma, is used when a list contains 3 or more items. All the items before and the coordinating conjunction, including the item directly before the conjunction, have a comma placed after it. The purpose of the serial comma is to increase clarity. Now, Kevin is going to explain why we use commas for lists, but not pairs. Take it, Kevin.
Thanks, Laura. In addition to being aware of that Oxford comma, one common comma error relates to pairs versus lists. A pair of items or ideas, meaning 2 words or phrases, joined by a conjunction, does not require a comma, such as my favorite ice cream is chocolate and vanilla. You only start using serial commas if and when there are 3 or more words or ideas in a list. The best ice cream is chocolate, comma, vanilla, comma, and mint chocolate chip. This rule is similar to what we talked about before with complex sentences. Remember that a complex sentence is really just a pair of verbs that have the same subject. I told my son to wash the dishes and take out the trash, no comma. But you can also have a subject followed by 3 or more verbs. And what you really have there is a list that should be using serial commas. To wash the dishes, comma, take out the trash, comma, walk the dog, comma, and go pick up the neighbor's mail. What's our next comma conundrum, Laura?
The next issue is how to use commas when integrating evidence into sentences. In academic writing, it is common to incorporate the author's names into sentences within other citation information. These are called signal phrases because they alert or signal the audience that a source is being used like a flare. As I mentioned earlier, it is important to avoid automation when using commas. In some signal phrases, you will not need to use commas at all, as shown in this example. In this APA-style example, the author's names are the subject of the sentence. Their names are followed by the publication year per APA style. Then the verb and predicate appear. You have a simple, complete sentence. No commas are needed. However, when the signal phrase is placed in an introductory clause, you would use a comma. What is an introductory clause? It is a word or phrase that appears before the independent clause. It could not stand on its own as a sentence. Rather, it helps to provide the audience with additional contextual information. However, if it were removed, the sentence would still be complete. Take a look at this example. The words before the comma provide helpful information. However, if they were removed, that sentence would still convey a complete thought. The author's names and publication year would simply have to move into a parenthetical citation. Thus, it is important to take away that commas have a grammatical function. They indicate an introductory clause precedes an independent clause. The words according to, along with, after, although, as, because, before, if, since, though, until, and when often start introductory clauses. You can use these helpful clues to remind yourself to double check if a sentence needs a comma. Related to introductory clauses are introductory words or transitions that help to connect a previous sentence to the current sentence. They help to bridge the information in a paragraph together to help it flow from one point to the next. In academic writing, the use of commas is based on grammatical rules. Because one sets off introductory clauses and introductory words with commas, please use them when you are expressing your own ideas as well as a source's ideas. In the example on this slide, the first sentence contains an introductory clause set off by a comma. Then the second and third sentences have introductory words set off by commas, and the last sentence uses another introductory clause set off by a comma. Keep in mind that academic writing is different from other types of writing. Kevin is going to go over comma usage when using dialogue and fiction, which is different from the type of writing you do in your research papers. Over to you, Kevin.
Thanks for that explanation, Laura. Now, it's also important to remember that commas do play a role in quotations and dialogue, but that does not necessarily mean they will always lead into or away from quoted material. It really just depends on the sentence and the situation at hand. Dialogue tags like he said, she said will be set apart by a comma when leading into the quoted material. Achilles yelped, comma, ouch, my foot. Mario remarked, comma, these mushrooms are delicious. Bart shouted, comma, eat my shorts. Now, leading away from quotes, the same tags would be set apart by commas that are contained within the quotation marks, the exception being if you have a question mark or an exclamation point. That punctuation would replace the comma. But if what follows is not a proper noun, keep in mind that your sentence is still not over, so a pronoun or common noun that follows the quoted material would stay lowercase, just like in these examples. In fiction writing, you can also pair an action or description alongside a piece of dialogue strategically, but you won't punctuate it the same way. You would treat those actions or descriptions as separate sentences and not use commas, just like these examples where the tags have periods. Now, what about those gray areas where we're taught that you might want to use a comma, or you usually use a comma, but we're always seeing the rules getting bent or broken? Well, the best rule of thumb is just to be a stickler for proper grammar and mechanics. Just because your favorite novelist hates commas, that doesn't mean you shouldn't use them, but that doesn't mean there isn't some wiggle room for interpretation. Commas are an important tool for setting apart descriptive information. As Laura explained already, introductory clauses, transitional words and phrases, and descriptive asides are all typically set apart from the main action of your sentence using commas. In the 1960s, comma, the space program was born. However, comma, we still have not put a man on Mars. Mars, comma, a place I would never want to live, is just too far away and we can't figure it out. In these examples, the info set apart by commas ranges from informative but non-essential to downright irrelevant. Does it really matter that I'd never want to live on Mars? Well, not to most people, so if we're going to mention that, it's better to set it off with some commas or even parentheses. But Laura, are there any times, situations, or reasons why someone might choose not to set apart descriptive information or transitions?
Yes, Kevin. There are times when descriptive information should not be set off using commas. The most common instance is when someone uses a clause that begins with the word that. When that clause follows a noun, it is always considered essential. Also, when that clause follows a verb that expresses a mental action, it is considered essential. In addition, you would not set off descriptive information if it provides the audience with necessary contextual information. For example, The example on the slide has a clause that begins with who underlined. The clause provides the audience with key information about the problem. If the underlined clause is removed, the sentence is still grammatically correct, but it loses some necessary contextual information that many students would find helpful. Thus, it would be better to keep the clause in the sentence and not set it apart using commas because the information is so vitally important and helpful. You may hear instructors or grammar guidebooks refer to this as an essential clause because it contains essential information, or a restrictive clause because it limits the thing it refers to. The phrase, who copy and paste information from websites into their papers without citing the websites, limits the number of students who are being discussed by the sentence. On the flip side, if a clause can be easily removed, it is referred to as non-essential or non-restrictive clause because it is adding extra information, but the meaning of the sentence does not change when it is included. That's just some helpful vocabulary to have in your repertoire. Kevin, what can you tell us about using appositives and how they affect sentences?
Well, appositives are descriptions or explanations paired side by side with a noun in your sentence. Often they will be a proper noun, such as a specific person or place. Again, when you read, you're probably going to find that writers are all over the place on the rules of commas and appositives. But I'm going to give you a really simple set of rules to follow on this one. If the description comes after the proper noun, then set apart the description with commas. Abraham Lincoln, comma, the 16th president, comma, was shot by John Wilkes Booth, comma, an actor. Now, if it's the other way around, the description leads into the specific name, then forget the commas. The 16th president, Abraham Lincoln, was shot by the actor John Wilkes Booth. I think that pretty thoroughly covers the comma, Laura, but maybe we could use a quick review of all the situations to use commas and how to use them. So remember to use commas before the coordinating conjunction of a compound sentence, when having lists of 3 or more, after signal phrases or dialogue tags that lead into freestanding quoted material. Use commas to set apart non-essential, descriptive, introductory, or transitional words and phrases. And use them when a description comes right after a proper noun.
Does anyone have any questions?
We have not received any questions at this point, Laura. We do have a couple of people viewing, so maybe we can wait a second or two and just make sure that everybody is on the same page.
Sure.
Sounds great.
Looks like everybody is set. I will remind anybody that if you do have questions later, or if you're viewing this later and you're not sure about anything, please feel free to post in our Google Plus space and we'll get back to you right away, or to post on this YouTube page and I will respond promptly. And then I will hand it back over to Laura and Kevin to wrap everything up.
All right. Well, if anyone's interested, these are the resources we used to create the presentation. And we just wanted to say thank you to everyone for taking the time to watch our presentation. And please feel free to join our Google Plus group to receive information about upcoming presentations provided by the EWC. Also, please subscribe to our YouTube channel to view past presentations. As always, if you have any questions about how the EWC can help you, please email writingcenter@umuc.edu.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Laura and Kevin, very much. The Writing Center series of workshops will return on the second Thursday of December. We are normally the third Thursday, but we'll be on the second Thursday next month, just so that we don't bump up against the holiday too closely. So hopefully we will see you then. And as noted, please drop us a line if you have any questions. Thank you very much.